What is up everybody, my name is LeakyTapsMan and this is another video in my wishlist series where I bring you guys a set of suggestions and ideas to basically improve a game series in its next iteration, and for this video I'm going to do Uncharted 4. Now Uncharted for me was essentially the reason that I wanted a PlayStation 3, well Uncharted 2 in particular. All three of the games have been quite exceptional, but that's not to say that they can't be improved. And this video lists what I think could improve the series and take it forward. Now, assuming that Uncharted 4 doesn't become a kart racer, because Naughty Dog seem to have this philosophy of make 3 games, then a kart racer, make 3 games, then a kart racer. We've seen it with Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter. But I think we can safely assume that Uncharted won't go down the kart racing route. Anyway, in terms of storyline, since Drake has gotten kind of serious with Eleanor, I think the only feasible route to go down is to either have Eleanor kidnapped or their potential offspring to be kidnapped to basically get Nathan Drake back in the game and provide him with motivation, because at the end of Uncharted 3 it kind of alluded to him winding down and giving the whole thing up. But as we all know, if you have a past it will get resurrected, and Nathan Drake does have a past, so I think that's a route that they could definitely take and explore some avenues of Drake's personality that we haven't really seen that much of. Now, in terms of the main treasure to actually be hunting within the game, one thing that I would particularly like to do is to try and find the elixir of life. Now, this is basically a potion that can grant immortality or eternal youth, and it can grant life to things that were not living before. Although there are many different stories behind the elixir of life, the one I would like to explore is within China, in the city of Xi'an. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but China in particular I think is a superb fit for Uncharted. It has so much history behind it. It can make for some fantastic levels. The architecture is amazing, and on top of that, modern day China is absolutely thriving and up and coming, so it has that mix of modern and ancient civilization which Uncharted has really built a name for itself upon. So China is one that I would love to see personally. One avenue that I've read online that a lot of people seem to think is a good avenue is to do Atlantis, seeing as it was kind of hinted at in the original Uncharted, where they mentioned a curse artifact sinking in the oceans, and while it could make some very interesting levels, I'm not sure basing an entire game around getting to Atlantis would be that feasible or that enjoyable. But certainly some kind of underwater levels, if they can incorporate it, I would be fully behind. I'm sure Naughty Dog could do an amazing job, as they always seem to do. Another thing I'd like to see in Uncharted 4 is basically a better main villain. Now, Uncharted 2 did a great job of this with Lazarevich, and while Uncharted 3's main antagonist, Catherine Marlowe, I believe, was an interesting villain in terms of her situation, I don't think she was given enough face time to actually develop herself as a villain, so just someone that seems like a larger threat. Alright, one thing I'd love to see in Uncharted 4 is some more dangerous locations and natural disasters. Now, the epic set pieces are more or less what defines Uncharted for a lot of people, so incorporating things like natural disasters, I'm talking about like tornadoes and earthquakes, this would make for some great experiences and would be memorable beyond the game itself. I mean, Uncharted 2 and 3 really did have some great set pieces. I'd just like to see more of them and in even bigger scope. Another thing I want to see in the next Uncharted is some kind of expansion within the collectibles. I'd just like a bit more information on the actual items rather than just them being flashes on the screen and just a picture of the item. I'd like to read a bit about it, why it's significant, if it is significant. It just gives that extra level of immersion for those that want to read more into the lore and mythology behind the whole thing. Not an essential addition by any means, but a nice addition, I feel. And although at this point I think it's pretty much a formality, Uncharted 4 has to be on the PlayStation 4 in my opinion. I know half of Naughty Dog are busy at work on The Last of Us. I personally would like to see them finish The Last of Us and then focus all of their resources on Uncharted 4 to make it the full experience it can be. You have to think with the PlayStation 4 and the leap in technology that it's going to bring, that they can just produce some amazing graphics. The animations would be out of this world. I mean, Uncharted really pushes the PS3 to the point where they're probably the best looking console games of this generation, or at least up there. And seeing as it's pushed the technology to its limits, progressing onto the PlayStation 4, you have to think that they could do some incredible things. And not just in terms of graphics either. When I mentioned about epic set pieces previously, we could see these become a lot more dynamic with the next generation of technology. So let's say a tornado won't necessarily take the same path each time, it could be randomly generated, and the destruction might not be the exact same as it would be if you were to replay it. Just little nuances like that that keep the game fresh, but maybe the current technology would provide a stumbling block if they were to try it on the PlayStation 3. Alright, in terms of multiplayer, which in my opinion is criminally underrated, I think Uncharted's multiplayer is up there with the best of them, in terms of third-person shooters at least. But for competitive matches, I would like to see more elements from the single player brought into the experience, so these set pieces that I mentioned can add an extra dynamic and just make these maps a lot more alive than they are. Because a lot of the maps in Uncharted 2 and 3 felt very static for the multiplayer, which seemed like a bit of a step back when you look at the amazing single player. I mean, there were signs of it in Uncharted 3, I'd just like to see it expanded upon even further. Because like I say, the multiplayer gameplay was incredibly solid, and if they can build upon that even further, then hopefully it will get the recognition as being a great multiplayer game as well that it deserves. And whilst on the topic of multiplayer, for the cooperative mode, or at least co-op adventure, I would like to see some actual proper cooperative elements rather than just 3 people basically taking the same path. I'd like some unique character abilities. So for instance, say Drake has improved acrobatics over Eleanor, who is, say, able to fit through tight gaps. That's just a brief example, I'm sure Naughty Dog could expand on that. But the point I'm trying to make is that have each character have abilities that are required to progress through the level, so you actually do have to cooperate rather than just running off and basically everybody trying to be like a Rambo. I just think co-op adventure should incorporate just that in adventure elements, so definitely more puzzles within the co-op game. And to finish with a couple of minor additions that I think could improve the Uncharted series, I would personally like to see some kind of PlayStation Vita interactivity. I'm not saying make it imperative for the game, but I think a companion tool would be really quite cool in the single player. So say you're playing in a certain level and you like the look of the location, you go onto your Vita, you can read about the location, you can read about the history behind it. Quite similar to the collectibles idea, just allow us to read more into the storyline and into the locations. And whilst it's not imperative to the gameplay by any means, it's just a nice addition. These are features that just build upon what is already an incredibly good foundation. And finally, one of my main gripes within Uncharted that they seem to have persisted with in all 3 games is the constant enemy waves. Now, some sections are worse than others, but I'm sure all Uncharted players know what I'm on about. You bust your ass killing a bunch of enemies only to have a bunch more swarm in until the point where you are wanting to snap your controller in half. It's really not a good tactic at ramping up the difficulty, in my opinion. I think increased difficulty should come through more organic means, so better enemy AI for one, and environmental hazards, bringing up new gameplay elements within the shooting sections. I think just throwing wave after wave of enemy isn't necessarily lazy, I just think it's a poor design choice. Alright, so that summarises everything that I'd like to see in Uncharted 4. I found it incredibly hard to actually fault Uncharted in almost any area because the games are essentially superb. But I do think those additions and features would just build upon it. As always, I'd love to hear your suggestions because you always think of great stuff. And if you like this style of video, I've got a wishlist series, so be sure to check that out on my channel. If you could leave a like, that would be fantastic. And thanks for watching. Goodbye.